All righty, let's get started with everything. Hello, Miss Stacy. I hope you had a wonderful Memorial Day. I know I wasn't here, but I hope you saw my short. I put a YouTube short up and I put it on TikTok. It was a math problem, so hopefully that helped. But either way, I am back today. And to those people joining us on YouTube, hello. Today we are starting a new set of questions. In fact, these are the questions that we created together on our last live last Wednesday. I showed you all how to create your own AI questions. So I figured since we made them, we might as well go over them. Now, just as a reminder, when we created these, we wanted it to be on some different topics, credits and debits, the disclosure statement, valuation, and finance. That is what we wanted to go over, or what we asked to go, AI to create. That's what they did. And I think the only other thing is going to be, remember, all of these are for a 360-day year. And just making it easy, we charge the day of closing to the seller. So for that first section of questions that we're going to do for credits and debits, those are what we need to remember, but let's roll on and get to it. And our first section is, of course, the credits and debits and closing disclosure calculations. We'll start there. Usually, if I was going to tell somebody to do a set of practice questions, I would tell you, unless you know the specific topic you're looking for help on, just kind of do, hey, do any topics that might show up on the exam. But we're starting with this one. So let's start with number one. A buyer's earnest money deposit of $5,000 is being held by the listing broker in a trust account. On the closing disclosure, the earnest money will deposit would appear as earnest money deposit will appear. I've been teaching a CE all day, y'all. I can get my words right. It will, the earnest money deposit will appear as, geez, that was hard to get out. Is it a debit to the seller, B, a credit to the buyer, C, a debit to the buyer, or D, a credit to the seller? So once we get those words out, we have to stop and think, what are we looking for? We want to know, how will the earnest money deposit appear? And one of those questions you need to ask yourself is, where is the money coming from? Because that would be a debit. And where is the money going to? Because that person is who gets credited the amount for that money, right? So since we are talking about earnest money deposits, we know these are monies that, yes, the buyer does pay, but the buyer pays that at the beginning of the transaction. Now we're at the end of the transaction, which means since the buyer didn't breach, they want their money back. And I see you in the chat there, Miss Stacy. Obviously, our answer, in fact, is B. It is a credit to the buyer, a credit to the buyer only. We are not debiting the seller because the seller doesn't have it. The question even says it's being held by the listing broker in a trust account. We can't charge. We can't charge for something you don't have. All right, Miss Caroline, I see you in the chat. If you have a problem you don't know what to do, sure. Do you have a so for those people that are here on YouTube, somebody has a question in my Zoom room. So Caroline, is it a math problem? Is it a question problem? Talk to me. What's going on?
Okay, I lost the voice. I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry, I didn't finish my text, but I got it back.
Oh,
Figured it
okay.
out. Thank
Okay, you
you.
figured it out.
Yeah,
Okay, I got
yeah.
you. You're good. I
I,
thought you meant you had a problem with a like a real estate question. You're saying
no,
you had a
I,
problem with hearing me. Okay. Well, that's
okay.
okay.
All right.
Welcome.
Thank you.
No problem. All right, number two. Annual property taxes of $4,800 are billed and paid in arrears. The new owner will pay the full amount of the bill at year end. The transaction closes September 16th. Using a 360-day banker's year and charging the day of closing to the seller, how will the tax proration be shown on the closing disclosure? So I was talking to another teacher the other day, and they brought up something that was really awesome. This idea that some of these answer choices that we have here, we can eliminate just by drawing out what's going on. We know the tax bill is $4,800 and the buyer's going to pay the annual bill at the end of the year. So if we know this closing is on September 16th, if this belongs to the seller and this is the buyer, well, that means the seller needs to compensate the buyer a larger amount. The seller needs to compensate the buyer a larger amount. So just knowing that, we know the seller needs to give an amount to the buyer, which means it needs to be a seller credit and a buyer debit. So just knowing that, if we know of the $4,800, the seller needs to give a larger portion of that money to the buyer, a seller credit and a buyer debit. I'm sorry, did I just say that right? Do. I said that wrong. Do. Let me say that correctly. A seller debit and a buyer credit. Like I said, I've been teaching all day, y'all. Whew. The seller needs to give and the buyer needs to receive the same amount. We can eliminate some answer choices. So in this one, it says in A, it says debit the buyer and credit the seller. Well, that's not right. That's not what we want. If I can get my thing to work, there we go. Because we want to credit the buyer, we want to debit the seller. Well, this one says we're going to debit the seller $1386.67 in B, and that means the buyer will be credited $1386.67. I can eliminate this question without doing any math because half of $4,800 would be $2,400. So we know the seller owes more than that $2,400. The seller owes more than $2,400 because they had this property the majority of the year. I don't even have to do math to know B is wrong. All right, C, debit the buyer. Well, we just said that's wrong. The buyer doesn't get debited, the buyer gets credited. So that can't be right, which means even without doing a single lick of math, we can know our answer has to be D, debit the seller $3,413, and then you credit the buyer the same amount. I can do the math, and we're going to have plenty of these on this page, so we'll do the math later, but I wanted to show you you could still guess your way to the right answer simply by drawing out this bar, understanding when the closing is, and saying, hey, that means the seller needs to pay the majority of that $4,800 to the buyer. We get the right answer, which of course is D. All right, let's move on to number 3. On the closing disclosure, the seller's existing first mortgage payoff is shown as what? So on the CD or closing disclosure, the seller's existing first mortgage payoff is shown as. Remember, we want to think, where is the money coming from and who is the money going to? The seller has an existing first mortgage, and the seller needs to close that out so they can give clear title to the buyer. The only way to clear out that first mortgage is for the seller to pay in its entirety that first mortgage off. So we know this needs to be a seller debit. It needs to be a seller debit because it has nothing to do with the buyer. The payoff has nothing to do. The buyer doesn't care which bank it is, how much it is. As long as I get good, clean title, I'm good. So, okay, A says a debit to the seller. We like that, but we like to go through and make sure that's our final choice. It's not a credit to the buyer, it has nothing to do with the buyer, or a debit to the buyer, it has nothing to do with the buyer. And it's not a credit to the seller because the seller owes it. The seller needs to pay it. It's a seller debit, making our answer A, a debit to the seller. All right, number 4. These are actually, I mean, I know these are AI and these may seem a little bit simple, but I would be honest, if you are struggling with these couple of questions so far, you need to go back and listen to them again and make sure you understand them because these are the main points, the type of things they're going to test you on. Okay. 4, the agreed upon sales price appears on the closing disclosure. The sales price. Who is that money coming from? And who does that money need to go to? It's a sales price. Who needs to bring that? Well, it's coming from the buyer. And who needs to receive the sales price? That would be the seller. So this needs to be a buyer debit and a seller credit. We know that to be true. Let's find the matching answer. A debit to the seller and a credit to the buyer. Well, no, we're not having the seller pay. The seller needs to receive their money so that they have a reason to give the buyer a deed. It's not A. A credit to both the buyer and the seller. Absolutely not. You're the buyer. You don't get money for no, that's not right. C, a debit to the buyer and a credit to the seller. Okay, well, that seems to match what we said here, but let's double check D. A debit to both the buyer and the seller. Well, why is the seller paying money? That's not right. So once again, just using a little bit of logic, we know that the answer is C. A debit to the buyer and a credit to the seller for the same amount. Hey, I'm selling you my house for $250,000. That's what the contract says. So buyer, you need to give me $250,000. That is the buyer debit. And I need to show in the paperwork that I received that $250,000 that you owe me. That would be a seller credit. C. All right, number 5. A new conventional first mortgage loan obtained by the buyer in the amount of $240,000 will appear on the closing disclosure as a new conventional first mortgage loan obtained by the buyer. It's in the amount of $240,000. Will it be a debit to the seller, a credit to the buyer, a debit to the buyer, or a credit to the seller? There's a loan. Who needs a loan the day of closing to cover this sales price from the above question? If the sales price of the house was $275, our price, right? That's the sales price. If the sales price is $275, we are saying, hey, the buyer is giving $275 to the seller. And the only way that is possible is if this buyer receives a mortgage. The buyer needs to receive a mortgage from the bank so that they have $275,000 to give that buyer. If the buyer is receiving, then we know that needs to be a buyer credit. Now, previous questions, we might have had a seller debit, but that's not going to be that's not going to be our answer. It's a buyer credit because the buyer's receiving it, but who's bringing this money? And that would be the bank. They're not part of our list here. So yeah, no, it's just a buyer credit. So it's not a debit to the seller. Okay, I do like B, a credit to the buyer. I don't like it's a debit to the buyer, and I don't like that it's a credit to the seller. So number 5, our answer is I'm bringing home a baby, a bumblebee. Oh, won't my mama be so proud of me? Hadn't done that one in a while. Our answer is B. All right, let's do number 6. And then when we do number 6, I'll switch to the next topic just so we're not doing all of our topics at once. A 4-unit rental property closes on June 19th. Each unit rents for $1,200 per month, and the seller has already collected the full June rent due from every tenant. Using a 30-day month and charging the day of closing to the seller, what rent proration appears on the closing disclosure? So this closing is going to be, make a little month here. This is the month of June. And on the 19th, we have a closing. And we know rent was paid on the 1st. So rent was paid in full. That's a G. Boop, boop. Paid in full on the 1st. But then closing happens on the 19th. So hopefully it becomes clear that the dates between the 1st and the 19th, that is money that the seller should legitimately keep. But between the 20th and the 30th of the month, all of this right here, that should be going to the new owner or the buyer. The seller keeps the monies from the 1st to the 19th because the seller's getting the day of closing. We know that. But then the dates, the 20th through the 30th, because we're using that 360-day year, that's when the new owner owns the property and they should get that rent. So we know there needs to be a credit from the seller. So it's a seller debit. Money comes from the seller and it's going to the buyer. It's a seller debit buyer credit. I'm not even going to do any math yet. Let's see which answers we can eliminate. A says debit seller buyer credit. Okay, we can keep that. B says debit seller credit buyer. We can keep that. C says debit buyer credit seller. No, we're not debiting the buyer. That's not the answer. And D says debit seller credit buyer. All right, we've at least eliminated one answer choice, which means we got a 33 and a third percent chance of getting this right. Well, the rent was $1,200. So on the 15th, if the closing was on the 15th, it'd be an even Steven split. But since it's not on the 15th, we know the buyer should keep, the seller should keep the majority of that $1,200. The seller should keep the majority of the $1,200. That doesn't really help us here because, all right, then yeah. So maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the math figuring out how much it is. And don't forget, it's a 4-unit rental property. It's $1,200 a month per unit. So if I can figure out how much it would be for 1 unit and then multiply that by 4, I'd be good, right? So if I take 1,200 and I divide by 30, if I take 1,200 and I divide it by 30, then that's going to give me what? $40. Where's my handy dandy calculator? 1,200 divided by 30. That is $40 a day. This is rent that's $40 a day, and we know the buyer needs to get the 20th through the 30th, which we happen to know is 11 days. Because remember, we got to count the 20th, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. That's not 10 days, it's 11 days. So if I do $40 times 11 days, that means the seller needs to give that buyer $440 for each unit. There's 4 units. So I know I can receive, or that seller needs to pay for that 11 days for 4 different units, that $440. So 440 times 4, and that gives me $1,760. That is going to be a seller debit for $1,760, and it's a buyer credit for 1760. Now let's see which one of those answers matches. Oh, and I see you all said D. I see. I see you all. Our answer is D, right here. Not too bad. Not too shabby, y'all. Like it. All right, I'm not going to say it's the end of that section, but that's where I want to stop with our closing disclosure stuff. We'll come back. I just want to do our next section of questions, which is valuation. So let's do a couple questions on valuation. This is the appraisal section. Which of the oh, let me change colors. I'm sick of the blue. Let's do green, because green for money. Which of the following is not a required condition of the standard definition of market value? So three things will be standard in that definition, and one is not standard. Okay, let's take a look at our answer choices. So the buyer and seller are typically motivated. Is that a true statement in market value? What do we mean by market value? Well, that's the price somebody is willing to, pay for what an appraiser thinks, somebody would be willing to pay for something. So yeah, I think the buyer and seller would be typically motivated. That's a true statement. Number B, or I should say letter B, both parties are well informed or well advised. I would say that's true. I mean, you need to know, well, like if it's market value, you have to know that the people buying and selling know what they're talking about. So B would be true too. C, the property must sell within 30 days of being listed. We wish. I would say that is not a true statement. And D, the price is not affected by special or creative financing or sales conditions. Yes, that is true. If we're going to find real market value, we need to make sure that there's no special situation going on, which means our answer, we're looking for the one that is not required, the false one, that would be C. The property must sell within 30 days of being listed. That's not a standard definition. It's not part of the standard definition of market value. And if it's D, actually, I'm said D, but the answer is C, and that means you get your song. We get our favorite song as soon as I find it. Boop.
C is for cookie. That's good enough for me.
Yeah, C is for cookie, but don't think I missed it.
I like carrots, and you should too. It goes crunch, 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 and it's good for you.
We like carrots.
And you should too. It goes
crunch, crunch, crunch. Crunch, crunch, crunch. All right, number 12. In the cost approach, we're talking about the cost approach. Let's choose a different color here. Let's do blue. In the cost approach, the difference between reproduction cost and replacement cost is best described as reproduction cost versus replacement cost. Well, hopefully you remember this part of your valuation. We know whenever an appraiser is doing the cost approach, they have to say, oh, let me figure out how much it would be to rebuild this new. Then let me figure out how much depreciation I would have because the item that I'm appraising isn't brand new. And then once they figure out how much the structure would be worth if it was depreciated, then they can add in the land value and you have a total. But they've got to figure out when they're saying, hey, if I'm going to rebuild this, which method or how do I want to rebuild it? Does this need to be reproduction or does this need to be replacement? It may seem silly, but the way I like to remember it is replacement has that soft C. So that means it needs to be similar. And reproduction has that harder C there. And that means it's going to be exact. Right. You got that, CT thing going on in both of those, right? So reproduction is going to be exact and replacement is going to be similar. So let's see which ones, if we have an answer for this, it's kind of close. A, reproduction cost, which is going to be exact, is generally lower because it uses modern materials. No, in fact, I would say that the opposite of that is true. If this said replacement is generally lower because it's using modern materials, then yeah, that'd be true. But think about it. If you had a 100-year-old house, if you want to reproduce it, it's got to have the same 100-year materials. And, they are gained or, I can't even think of the word I'm looking for here, but it's received or gotten in the same ways, and it's the same thing. Think of something like plaster and drywall. If it's a reproduction of a house, it'd have to have plaster like the original. But if it's a replacement, it could just have some drywall because, that's more modern. So it's not A. Let's try B. Replacement, that's a similar replacement cost, duplicates the structure exactly, including outdated features. No, because it's not exact, it's similar. It's not B. C. Reproduction cost is used only for new construction. Replacement cost is used only for older buildings. Reproduction cost is used only for new construction. Replacement is used only for older buildings. I got to tell you, I don't love this, not older thing, but I don't love the only. I mean, is it true? Usually this is how it goes. Of course, but I don't know about only. This is a maybe. We'll give C a maybe. Let's try D. Reproduction cost creates an exact replica using original materials and design. And then C, or the next part, replacement cost creates a structure equivalent utility using current materials. Well, you know what? This is exactly what I said up here. D is exactly what I said. So although I was already right, I didn't really like the only because it's not always true. C is not our answer. Our answer, in fact, is D as in David. Or how much is that doggy in the window? All sorts of songs. Our answer is D, 412. All right, let's see. Let's do a couple more. An investor is evaluating a small rental property using the gross rent multiplier, all right, the GRM. Comparable properties have sold at an average GRM of 138 based on the monthly rent. The subject property generates $18.50 per month in rent. Using the GRM, what is the indicated value of the property? All right. Well, we know GRM stands for gross rent multiplier. I can spell And whatever this number is, right? Whatever this unknown number is, I take it and I multiply it by the gross rent, and that will give me the value. And that's what we're looking for, the indicated value of the property. All right, well, if our GRM times the gross rent equals value, we know our GRM is 138. Our gross rent is $18.50 per month. So if I do a little bit of math here, 138 times 18.50, I got $255,300. Boom, and we see that matches answer A. Love it. Absolutely love it. Okay, number 14. A commercial property has a net operating income, or NOI, of $84,000. Investors in the area require a 7.5% capitalization rate. What is the indicated value of the property using the income approach? Well, once again, we have a very nifty little formula. If I take the NOI and I divide it by the capitalization rate, I will get value. I know people sometimes get caught up in the cap rate, NOI. Oh my gosh, it's so much, but NOI, net operating income, cap rate, capitalization rate. If you can simply remember this formula, you're good. So now let's fill it in. It says the NOI is $84,000. We're dividing that by the cap rate, which we were told is 7.5%. So I'll put that in my calculator. 84,000 divided by 7.5%. And that gave me $1,120,000. $1,120,000. And we can see by what we have here, that matches our answer B, 1120. I can't say 1120, but $1,120,000. We're on a roll. Oh, I see what you did there, Miss Stacy, with the baby face. You got the cutest little baby face. Enough of that. We'll finish you know what? We'll do a couple of these. We'll do 2 more, and then we'll go on to these finance questions because I want to make sure we get those in too. All right. Which of the following is not one of the 4 tests of highest and best use? Which of the following is not one of the 4 tests of highest and best use? All right, so we're looking for the one. There's going to be 3 that are true, that are, and there's going to be 1 that's false, 1 that is not. So legally permissible. Is that one of our 4 tests of highest and best use? Yes. Physically possible. Yeah, I would say that's got to be one of our concepts of highest and best use. Financially feasible. Yep. That has to be there. And then that means our answer has to be D, aesthetically pleasing. And yeah, I agree with that. The whole idea of highest and best use doesn't have anything necessarily to do with it aesthetics. Could it affect the value a little bit? Yes, but it's not going to affect the highest and best use. The highest and best use has to be legally permissible, physically possible, financially feasible. And they look at that and they say, okay, well, what use does all these things and generates the most money? Our answer is D because we're looking for the false one. Let's try selection. Let's leave 16, 17, 18 from when we come back. Let's jump to finance. Grab some water. All right. 19, finance. Private mortgage insurance, or PMI, on a conventional loan is generally required when? Private mortgage insurance, PMI, on a conventional loan, because you know if it was a Fannie Mae loan, a FHA loan, then it'd be MIP, right? Private mortgage insurance on a conventional loan is generally required when? Is it A, the borrower's credit score is below 620, B, the loan is government issued, C, the loan to value ratio is below 80%, or D, the loan value ratio exceeds 80%. What say you? All right, Miss Stacy, I see you've given me a D. Miss Caroline, you're giving me D. Stacy, you said C. If loan to value ratio is, I think that D was for the last one, is C for carrots. Well, let's think about this. In fact, I want to show you all a slide. I hate to do it to you. Let's see if I can do this. LTV. Hey, what happened? Let's see. LTV. That's a U. There we go. Loan to value ratio. Haha. Sometimes it gets a little weird, which is why I want to show you this slide. You got a high LTV, you get a low LTV. The loan to value ratio says, hey, we want to compare the amount of the loan to the value of the house. So a high LTV would be like 100%. You want to borrow 100% of the value. So if the house is worth 150, a 100% LTV loan means, okay, you want to borrow 100% of $150,000. So that's a high LTV. Well, a low LTV might be, look, I pay half, I borrow half. I have half of the money, I need to borrow half of the money, which means the loan would be 50%. So if the value was, what did I say, 150, if that's the value, if I need to borrow 50%, then that means I need to borrow 75K. 50% is a lower number. It's a low LTV. Right? So sometimes a high LTV, low LTV, that gets confusing. But it's 80%. The idea here is if you need to borrow more than 80%, if the loan is greater than 80%, when you have to borrow more than this line right here, then we're going to make you pay PMI, private mortgage insurance. If you're borrowing less than 80%, there's less risk. And since there's less risk, they don't need you to purchase an additional insurance policy to cover them. That's okay, Miss Stacy, that you got them mixed up. That is exactly why I wanted to show you, because trust me when I say you are not the only one. People get this confused all the time at first. Hopefully you'll just remember this. And if you've never seen this slide before because you're not one of my pre-students, take a picture, man. Take a picture. That's why I do this. But understanding what makes a high LTV and a low LTV, even if you have to kind of think about it, oh, 90% LTV, you're borrowing more. So that means it's a higher LTV. It's more risky. The more you borrow, the more risk it is for the borrower. Oh, and you're going to have to pay PMI. Hopefully that helps everybody, but let's go back to our questions. So private mortgage insurance, PMI, on a conventional loan is generally required when it's not A, the borrower's credit score is below 620, that's not it. B, the loan is government issued. Well, no, if it was government issued, it'd either be a VA loan. Well, I can't even say issued. It should be insured. I should say insured, not issued. But if it was a VA loan, they probably wouldn't be paying PMI or anything. And if it's an FHA loan, they would be paying MIP. If the loan to value ratio is below 80%, well, no, that's a low LTV. And that means we don't need extra insurance. Our answer's got to be D. If your loan to value ratio exceeds 80%, then more than likely you'll have to pay PMI. Woot, woot. All right. Number 20. Which of the following statements about VA loans is most accurate? Which of the following statements about VA loans is most accurate? Is it A, VA loans require monthly mortgage insurance premiums for the life of the loan? B, VA loans require a minimum down payment of 3.5%. C, VA loans can offer 100% financing and do not require monthly mortgage insurance, although most borrowers pay a funding fee. Or D, VA loans are available only to active duty military personnel. All right, let's go through these one by one. VA loans require a monthly mortgage insurance premiums for the life of the loan. A, no, that's not true. Mm-mm. In fact, that wouldn't be VA loans. That would be FHA loans. So it's close, but no cigar. That's the wrong answer here. And if we were to change that VA to FHA, it'd be the right answer for another question. B, VA loans require a minimum 3.5 down payment of 3.5%. No, once again, that sounds a little bit more like FHA loans, now doesn't it? C, VA loans can offer 100% financing and do not require monthly mortgage insurance, though most borrowers pay a funding fee. Well, you know what? I like the sound of that one. That sounds right. But remember, and we were just talking about this the other day, a group of teachers, for this test, we have to choose the best answer. So C looks good, but we need to make sure that D is not better, or make sure that D is wrong so that we know that C is correct. So let's see what D says. VA loans are available only to active duty military personnel. Well, no, that's not true because it's a VA. The V is for veteran. Did I spell that right? Veteran. Veteran. Why does that look like I spelled that wrong? Veteran, vet. No, okay. I don't know why. I think I'm having one of those days. My brain is fried. Vet. How about we just say that? If you are a U.S. vet, then you're getting a loan. Lord, y'all, that's what happens when I teach all day. My brain goes a little fuzzy. So our answer is C. Let's do 21. Speaking of TILA, RESPA, TRID, all of those things, let me get y'all's opinion and you tell me if this would help. Let me pull it up here. Recents. This is something I'm thinking about doing a video on. So, we have notes on it. Let me clear it. But I'm thinking Chris and I will get together, and as you can see, this is a little cheat sheet on the different real estate laws and acts. And what we want to do is kind of go through and do a series of videos where we talk about the different laws on discrimination and civil rights, a short description of what it is, what the law is, and then most importantly, what are the most tested exam concepts? Maybe I should do this. So there'd be a video on the acts and laws about discrimination and civil rights. And then we'd have another video talking about the laws, acts, and whatnot, having to do with lending and settlement and what are the most tested exam concepts. Then we do a video on, advertising and antitrust and their most tested exam concepts. And then, one on contracts and property law, and then one on environment. Do we think that would be helpful? Is this something you'd like to see me and Chris do, is go over this stuff? Is this something that you all want or need? Just let me know at some point. If you all think it would be helpful, Chris and I will record those after our CE season. Chris and I are in North Carolina, or we do North Carolina, and we're smack dab in CE season, which is why my brain is fried. But if you think that would be a good idea, going over these acts and laws in a little video series, let me know. All right, but back to our questions. 21. Under TILA/RESPA integrated disclosure or TRID rule, the TILA/RESPA integrated disclosure. Oh, you said you would love that and you were going to be brave and take the test on June 11th. I know you have this, Miss Caroline. If you email me, I'll go ahead. I don't know if we're going to finish before the 11th, so I'll go ahead and send you that document, even though it's not perfect yet, to you so you can study. But Caroline, we are excited for you. Whoop, whoop, whoop. So, under TRID, the borrower must receive the closing disclosure at least how many business days before consummation of the loan? So under TRID, how many days must the borrower receive the closing disclosure? Is it A, 7 days, B, 3 days, C, 1 day, or D, 10 days? Let's see. How many days do you have to receive the CD before closing? Do 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 do. So think about it. If there's a change, how many days does that push it back? And our answer is actually B, 3 days. You have 3 days before closing that the borrower needs to get their copy of the CD, and there can't be any changes, because if there's any changes that affect some of the things on that CD, they'd have to wait a whole new 3 days before closing. So you've got to make sure you get it at least 3 days before closing. Doo-doo. Good job, y'all. All right, 22. A buyer is obtaining a $260,000 loan, and the lender charges 2 discount points to lower the interest rate. How much will the buyer pay in discount points? I feel like, in fact, I think I did. Didn't I just put up a video on discount points? Or is that what's going up tomorrow? Either I just did a video, a YouTube short on it, or I'm getting ready to. But either way, can't remember what I put when. I know I've got one of these coming as a short, but let's do this one now. So what do we know about points? Let's start with that. We know a point will always cost the borrower 1% of the loan amount. And not that they're asking us, if they asked us, and in this question, they're not asking us, but if they had asked a different question, well, how do these 2 points affect the interest rate? When you pay a point, it moves the loan 1/8%. So that's what we want to remember about discount points. It always costs the borrower 1% of the loan amount, but it would move the loan interest rate 1/8% for each point. So if it's a $260,000 loan and it's 2 discount points, well, 1 point is 1%, which means 2 points would be 2%. I can take that 2% and multiply it by our loan amount, $260,000. So, doing my math, my fancy dancy math, that should give us an answer of $5,200. And that is going to be A. Hey, the answer's A. The answer's A. Hey, the answer's A. Okay. Number 23. Oh, these are some good finance questions. I maybe should do, when we finish this, maybe just do some finance questions, making sure y'all are good on that. In fact, Caroline, you tell me, because you're going to test on the 11th, what topics do you want me to do some questions on? And I will make sure before you test, we go over those topics with questions. So, which clause in a mortgage allows the lender to demand immediate payment of the entire remaining loan balance upon the borrower's default? We know the key here is upon the borrower's default. There's 2 clauses that we often talk about, and where, hey, because of this clause, borrower, pay us everything now. The question really becomes with those 2 clauses is why? Why are they paying everything now? Is it because they defaulted? Or is it because they sold or alienated themselves from the property? In both of those cases, you have immediate payment of the entire balance. This one says because the borrower defaulted. So is it A, the defeasance clause, B, the alienation clause, C, the acceleration clause, or D, the subordination clause? Well, it's not the defeasance clause. Remember, defease, like our defeasible estates, a defeasance clause says something needs to end. And in the case of mortgages, it's the bank's interest needs to end when the loan is paid off. It's not A. B, the alienation clause. Well, yeah, you do have to pay everything back immediately, but it's because you alienated or you sold the property. That is a different reason. We're looking because the borrower defaulted, so it's not B. C, acceleration clause. I'm pretty sure that's the right answer, but let's hold off and make sure it's correct. Or D, subordination clause. Well, that's not it. We know the subordination clause basically is the bank saying, all other liens need to come after us. Not tax liens, not state tax liens, property tax liens, but all other liens need to come after us. That's the subordination clause. So our answer is our favorite song. You know what it is.
I like carrots, and you should too. It goes crunch, 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 and it's good for you.
We like carrots.
And you should too. It goes
Crunch,
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 crunch.
crunch.
Love it. All right, it is C, acceleration clause. Guys, this is a good question. This is a great question. We love this question. You need to make sure you understand these mortgage clauses. You're probably going to be tested on them. Ooh, Caroline, you said law of agency. You need to bring that score up a little bit. All right, let me write that down so I can have AI create us some agency questions for Sunday. Writing that down. And I know, again, if you weren't here last Wednesday, you saw me, you can go back and see how I create these questions. It's no secret. All right, but we'll do some agency questions. Yeah. All right, 24. A seller agrees to keep their existing $150,000 mortgage in place and extends a new $200,000 loan to the buyer that includes or wraps around the existing loan. The buyer makes one payment to the seller, and the seller continues making payments on the original first mortgage. This arrangement is best described as A, a blanket mortgage, B, a package mortgage, C, an open-end mortgage, or D, a wraparound mortgage. Now, first and foremost, once again, we like this question. You need to know, like, all of these answer choices, every single one of these could be test questions. They are real types of mortgages. They're not all the right answer here. But remember, I like to say, if you're taking these practice questions and you just go, oh, the answer's something, and you roll on, you're losing so much, or you're studying from it, right? So what is our answer here? The question kind of told us. It wraps around the existing loan. So yeah, our answer actually is D. It's a wraparound mortgage. That's our answer. And do we know what the other answer choices mean? Even though they're not the right answer for this question, do we know these vocab words? So what we have is a blanket mortgage, which we know covers more than one parcel of land. So a lot of times, people building, new houses and vacant lots, and then they want to convert those and build houses on them. That would be a blanket mortgage. B, a package mortgage is going to be real and personal property. C, an open-end mortgage is the opposite of what I'm going to call regular mortgages. What do I mean by that? Usually, if you are getting a new loan, right? If you're getting a new loan, you're like, hey, bank, I need to borrow $150,000 to buy this house. And the bank goes, here's $150,000 so you can buy this house. Sometimes they could give you an open-end loan, which says, hey, bank, I need to borrow a $150,000 loan. And the bank looks at you and says, you know what? We'll give you $250,000. You just take the $150,000 that you need right now, but we're going to leave it open. That extra $100,000 that you don't need today, it's open for you to come and get that money from us later. That is an open-end mortgage. Most regular loans are closed. Once you get that 150, that's all they approved you for. You want more money, that's a brand new loan. Open end means they're leaving the end open. So our answer is D, wraparound mortgage. We know that, but we also use it as a review of the other stuff. All right, let's finish up with 25. A buyer is purchasing a home for $340,000 with a down payment of $51,000. The property appraises for $345,000. What is the loan to value ratio used by the lender? All right. So, loan to value, we're comparing the amount of the loan to the value of this property. We're asking about the value of the property. And this is where we have to go, well, okay, they're buying it for $340,000, but it appraised at $345,000. Which of these numbers do we use? And here's the thing, when we talk about somebody getting a loan, we always go with the lower number. They're always going to take the lower number. So since they're purchasing the home for $340,000, we would go with this number. However, let's say they're purchasing the home for $340,000, but it appraised for $320,000. If that was the case, we'd use $320,000, not $340,000. You always go for the lower of these numbers if you've got conflicting, information between the purchase price and the appraisal. But in this case, it tells us it appraised for more, so our lower number is here, this $340,000. So our value is $340,000, and our loan is going to be what is remaining once they pay the $51,000. So if they owe $340,000 to the seller, but they're putting down $51,000, whatever's remaining is the loan amount. So we're going to do $340,000, subtract the $51,000, and that gives us, hey, this person needs a loan for $289,000. So I'll take that number. Our loan is for $289,000. So we're basically saying $289,000 is what percent of $340,000, which means we can say $289,000 divided by $340,000. And when you do that, $289,000 divided by $340,000, that gives us 0.85, or that is converted to a percentage, 85%. And that is our answer, 85%. Whoop, whoop. All right. So how did that go? Does that make sense? Right. Now, I see some of y'all chose 51%. Now, that's the wrong answer, but that's because it says here the down payment is $51,000. Remember, I'm going to scoot, let's do it this way. Boom. Give ourselves a little video here. Oh, that's where I was just talking about the wraparound, remember? If the total cost, the total sales price is $340,000. Part of that is going to be a loan, and part of that is going to be a down payment. Well, the down payment was for $51,000. And the loan was, we didn't know, but we did figure it out. Our loan amount ended up being for $289,000. And we know that if this is 85%, right? We did the math. This would be the 15%. So if you manipulated directly the 51,000, you have to take the next step. The 51,000 has to do with the down payment, and this is a loan to value, not a down payment to value. Easy, easy mistake to make. Or if you had used the 345, that would have been wrong too. All right, that's why we do these here. We do these math problems now so you make the mistakes with me and not on your exam. So I'm going to go eat something for today because I have managed to go to 8 o'clock and not eat a single thing because I'm silly and was teaching all day. But I will be back this Sunday at 7 p.m. Also, not today, but tomorrow and probably a couple days in between. You know, I've been putting the YouTube shorts up. They're also on TikTok. Even if you're not a huge TikTok fan, go like them. If you look up Candace Ellis, or on TikTok, it's Candelis on TikTok. Even if you don't want to follow me and like me, even if you don't want to watch that way, so I can go live. I have to have so many likes before I can go live. So help me get there, and then I can stream this live to TikTok as well. Guys, if you have questions, you know how to find me. Otherwise, have an amazing part of your week. I think it's going to be, with end of May. We're at the end of May already, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye, Candace.